All right, guys, today we get to start having some fun. If you notice, just looking at the example right off the bat, that the problems don't look like your 6th grade math problems anymore. We're moving on into 7th grade math. We're done reviewing, we're done looking at what you've done before. Now it's moving on to doing something new. And the problems look a little bit more scary, but we're just doing one step at a time, and really they're not that much more difficult than what you've done in the past. So today we're doing solving two-step equations, and the reason it's called a two-step equation is if you look at the equation, we've got -8 times n minus 5. In order to solve this equation and get n by itself, we can't just do one step because n is being multiplied by -8 and we're subtracting 5. There's two steps that we have to get rid of. And we need to be a little bit careful in doing that, which is why we had some of the steps. We had you practice what you did last week. One thing that we have to be careful of, the biggest thing we have to be careful of, is that we get rid of the numbers in the right order. We have a -8 that's being multiplied and a -5 that we've got to get rid of. But if we don't get rid of them in the right order, we're going to get the wrong answer. And just to give you an example of what I'm talking about, is if I have this same problem, -8 times n minus 5 equals 19. Right now, I need to divide by -8 to get rid of the -8. I also need to add 5 to get rid of the -5. So I have my railroad tracks, and I have to decide which one I should do first. And what happens is, we need to remember that whatever we do to one side, we're going to do to the other. But we have to do it to the entire side. So for example, this problem, if I want to divide by -8 first, I can't just divide this by -8. That's not the entire side. This whole equation over here is on that side. So I have to divide everything by -8. And then I would divide everything on this side by -8. And as you can tell, 19 divided by 8, that's not going to be a very nice number. So that's probably not what I want to do first. Another example is if I had n divided by -8 minus 5 equals 19. In this problem, when I do my railroad tracks, I've got a divide by -8 to get rid of and a -5 to get rid of. So I have to add 5 and I have to times by -8. But if I don't do them in the right order, I'm going to get the wrong answer. So for example, if I times by -8, I have to times both sides by -8. I can't just multiply this piece by -8. I have to put the whole thing in parentheses and times by a -8, and then times this side by a -8. And again, that's going to cause me some heartache because it makes this go away, but I'm also doing -8 times -5. So I'm actually increasing numbers on this side, which I don't like to do. So I'm going to show you a quick way to make sure that you get rid of the correct number first. And it's not a difficult thing to do. It just requires you to pay attention to what's going on in the problem. So step one, just like last week, you're going to draw the railroad tracks on each side of the equal sign. You're going to draw railroad tracks on each side. So here's my example, and I'm going to draw my railroad tracks. And when I look at this side, there's quite a few things going on. On this side, it's nice. It's just a 19, not too bad. Step two is to simplify if necessary. And I don't know how much of that we'll practice this year, but it is something that you might see. We did see a problem like that last week where what it means by simplify is to distribute if we need to, or to combine like terms. So if we need to distribute on this side or combine like terms on this side, we want to do that before we start solving. Today we probably won't practice that very much, but you will see it in the future. Right now I don't have any distribution, there's no parentheses, and these n's can't combine with this -5. So I don't need to worry about combining like terms either. So I can skip down to step number 3. Step number 3, just like last week again, is to circle the variable. And not just the variable, you're going to circle the variable and everything attached to it. And I'm going to remind you what that means. When I say everything attached to it, I've got a -8 next to the n. But after the n, there's this -5, and I know a few people have been confused about what I mean by attached to the variable. So here's what I mean. If it's in front of the variable or if it's below the variable, like a fraction. So if it's in the front of the variable, I'm going to circle the number and the sign. If it's below the variable, I'm going to circle it. But I'm not going to circle this negative because this negative doesn't go with these numbers. This negative goes with the 5. So I'm just going to circle the negative 8n because that all goes together. And this is just a little thing. It doesn't change the math a lot. It's just a way to help you remember what to do first. Okay, because step 4 is kind of telling us what we need to do first. What we need to get rid of first. Remember, I've got a times by negative 8 and a minus 5. I got to get rid of both of those. So step 4, here's kind of the key in doing this problem, is that the first thing we need to do is to undo all addition and subtraction first, which is kind of backwards because in the order of operations, you normally multiply and divide. But we're doing our math problem backwards, so we have to do the order of operations backwards. Instead of multiplying and dividing first, we're going to undo all of the addition and subtraction. So what that means is if I'm adding or subtracting over here, I need to get rid of it first. Now I had you circle what's attached to the n because there's a little clue that will help you make sure you're getting rid of the right thing first. If it's in the circle, if it's attached to the end, you get rid of it last. So this minus 8, I can't get rid of yet because there's something else on the outside of the circle I need to remove. So we're going to undo addition and subtraction first, and we'll do that in just a minute. Then we're going to undo any multiplication and division. That's what's inside the circle. So we're going to get rid of what's on the outside of the circle first, and then we're going to get rid of what's on the inside of the circle. So let's go ahead and do that. Up here, I've got negative 8 times n. That's on the inside of the circle. That's my clue that I can't get rid of it yet because there's something out here I need to get rid of first. And that's the minus 5. So to undo minusing 5, I have to plus 5 to both sides. And a lot of people last week had minus 5 written here and then minus 5 written below it, and they were saying that those canceled each other out. They only cancel each other out if they're opposites, and minus 5 and plus 5 are opposites, so those go away. And 19 plus 5 is 24. And I've got my equal sign here. And on the left, this minus 5 went away, and I'm just left with my negative 8 times n. So I got rid of the addition and subtraction. All that's left is what was inside the circle. So now I can get rid of that. And to get rid of my negative 8 times n, this isn't minus 8n. This is a multiplication problem. So to get rid of that, I'm going to divide by negative 8 and divide by negative 8 on both sides. So negative 8 divided by negative 8, those cancel out, and I'm left with just n. And that is going to be equal to 24 divided by negative 8. Something you guys aren't doing very much based on what I saw last week is using your calculator when you need to. 24 divided by 8. Most of you know that that's 3, but we're not dividing by 8, we're dividing by negative 8. So we're going to put it in the calculator just to make sure that we do it correctly, and that tells me that it's a negative 3. So n is equal to negative 3. I think. That is what I think my answer is. That was the whole goal of everything we did, was to get n and figure out what it is. I think it's negative 3. But we want to make sure. We want to make sure that we did it correct. So we'll fill out these last couple sentences and then we'll plug that in and make sure we did it right. One little reminder here, and that was a good example of it, was that remember when you're undoing things, that you're changing the operation, you're not changing the sign. A common mistake that we were seeing is right here, we're timesing by negative 8. To undo it, we divide by negative 8. A few people were dividing by positive 8. We don't change the sign. If this is a negative 8, that's what we need to divide by. The sign goes with it. We just change the operation. Instead of multiplying, we divide. So just be careful of that one. 5 is what we just did. We solved for the variable. That means we got the variable by itself, and I wrote down my answer right here. And step 6 is everybody's favorite step, and that's checking the solution. So I'm going to take what I think n is supposed to be, and I'm going to go way up here and plug it back in. So I think that -8 is multiplied by n, which is -3, and minusing 5 should give me 19. That's what I think is going to happen. So I'm going to put this in my calculator and make sure that it matches. So -8 times -3, and then I'm going to subtract 5. And when I hit enter, I want to get 19, which I do. So I know that I did this correctly because when I plugged in n, I got the right answer. Make sure that you plug it into the exact equation we started with. We talked about that a lot last week too. Some of you were moving the numbers around. It has to go in the same order as the original equation. Okay? So let's just, I know that's a lot of information. Let's just practice a couple of these and help you through them. I know we're already at 11 minutes. I'm okay with that because this is a lot of information for you to hang on to, and it's important for you to remember. So we're going to take our time, make sure you understand everything you need to. Here's my new equation, -5g minus 26 equals 9. I'm going to draw my railroad tracks. I don't have any like terms. I don't have any parentheses to distribute, so I'm okay with what it looks like now. I'm going to circle my variable and what's attached to it, what's in front of it and below it, which is just this -5. And that's my clue that before I can get rid of the -5, I got to get rid of this minus 26. And I do that by adding 26 to this side, because a minus 26 plus 26, those just cancel. And then I add 26 to the right side. And 9 plus 26 is 35. And that's equal to what's left over here, my -5g. The minus 26 canceled out, but I still have a -5 times g. Now that this looks more like last week, I've got -5 times g. To undo timesing by -5, I need to divide by -5. Not 5, there's a negative with it, so I divide by -5. And I divide this side by -5. 35 divided by 5 is 7. A positive divided by a negative makes it -7. And that's on the right side. On the left, those go away, and all I'm left with is my variable, g. So I think that g is -7. And to make sure that I'm correct, I'm going to plug -7 all the way back up here. I'm going to plug it in for g. And I don't have a lot of room on my paper because I'm writing big so you can see it. So I'm going to just plug it in on my calculator. -5 times what I think g is, -7. So I took this -7 and I plugged it in for g. So -5 times -7 minus 26 is supposed to equal 9. And it does. So I can feel good about my answer. I think I did things right. Okay, number 2, we're going to go through these a little bit quicker. Railroad tracks. Nothing to simplify, no distribution, no combining like terms. I'm going to circle my variable and anything in front or underneath it. So the +6 goes with my y. And that's my clue. I can't get rid of this yet. I've got to get rid of the -24. So I'm going to add 24 to make that go away. And I'm going to add 24 to this side. So I'm left with 6 y's. I'm not going to write that plus because that just means it's a positive 6. 6y is equal to 0 plus 24 is 24. Now I can get rid of this 6. And right now it's 6 times y. So I have to divide by 6. Divide by 6. So I'm left with a y being equal to, since those cancel, y is equal to 24 divided by 6, which is just 4. And I think that that's my answer. So I'm going to go back up here and I'm going to plug it in. -24 plus 6, and I have to multiply my 6 by my y, which is 4, equals 0. And I think I can do this one in my head. 6 times 4 is 24. And a -24 plus a positive 24 cancels each other out, and I'm going to get 0. So I feel pretty confident in that answer. Number 3, looks like we've got some fractions, which tend to scare you people a little bit, but we're just going to follow the same steps and make sure that we are a little bit more careful here. We draw our railroad tracks. There's no combining like terms. There's no distribution going on, so I'm going to circle my variable, which is m, and anything in front or below it. And right now there's a divide 5 underneath it, so I'm circling that, and that's my clue. I can't get rid of that yet because there's something on the outside. There's a -6, so I have to add 6 to make that go away. So I add 6 to the other side, and I'm left with m divided by 5 equals 6 plus 6 is 12. Now I want to get rid of this dividing by 5. And the opposite of dividing by 5 is multiplying by 5. So when I divide m by 5 and then multiply it by 5, those 5's go away. So I have to multiply this side by 5. So I'm left with m equals 12 times 5, which is 60. I think it's 60. So I'm going to plug it back in all the way up here. I'm going to skip all of this work. I'm going to go clear to the beginning, and instead of an m, I'm going to put a 60 in there. And again, I'm out of space, so I'm just going to put it in my calculator so you can see it. I start with a fraction, and on top is m, which I think is 60. And on the bottom is 5. I'm going to push the arrow over, and I'm going to minus 6 from that, and I'm hoping to get 6, which I do. So I feel good about that answer. Okay. Number 4. Lots of negatives, but we don't worry about that because we're going to do one step at a time. Railroad tracks. No distribution, no combining like terms, so I don't need to worry about that. I do need to circle the n and anything attached to it. So there's a negative in front of it and there's a divide 3 underneath it. So that's all getting circled with my n. There's my hint, there's my clue. I can't get rid of that yet. I've got to get rid of this first. And to get rid of a -8, all I have to do is add 8. That's simple. I'm going to add 8 to both sides. -15 plus 8, let's make sure we do that correct. You put it in your calculator. -15 plus 8. And when I hit enter, that tells me it's a -7. So make sure that you're doing that correctly. And my equal sign. On this side, I'm still left with everything in this circle. I got rid of the -8, but I still have this left. So I've got a -n over 3. And now we've practiced this negative out in front. This is all that's left, and I don't like a negative in front, and I don't like the negative with the n. And remember, what's cool about these problems is that negative can move a little bit, and we're going to move it down to the 3 so that we can get rid of it. So instead of -n over 3, I'm going to write it as n divided by -3 equals -7. Because that simplifies it for me. I know that to undo dividing by -3, I need to multiply by a -3. So that gets rid of the 3 and the negative at the same time. Those go away, but I have to multiply this side by a -3. So I'm left with n on the left. I got rid of everything else. And on the right-hand side, -7 times -3. Most of us know that answer, but we're going to plug it in just to make sure we don't make any simple mistakes. -7 times -3 is a positive 21. So I'm going to make sure that I put a positive 21. I'm going to remember that a negative times a negative is a positive. So n is equal to 21. I think n is equal to 21. Let's plug it back in all the way up here at the top. Ignore everything in between. Just take what you think n is, and we're going to plug it in all the way up here. And we're going to make it look the same on the calculator. I want you to write it down, but I don't have space without making your notes messier. So I'm just going to plug it in. There's a negative sign out in the front, and then I have a fraction. And on top of that fraction is n. And I think that n is 21. So on top, I'm going to put 21. On bottom needs to be a 3. And then after the fraction is a -8. And when I hit enter, I get -15, which is what I wanted. So again, n equals 21. I feel good about that answer. I know that's a lot of new information. I know that took some small problems that you've done for almost a year now, and it's added a few steps into it. Hopefully you can see the benefits of the railroad tracks, and you can see the benefits of circling your variable to help you remember what to get rid of first. That's why we had you practice last week. What I want you to do is pause the video. I want you to try these 4 problems on your own, and when you're finished, bring them up to me. Let's look at them. It might take you a good chunk of the class period here, and that's okay. We've got a few days that we're going to practice, but I want you to follow these steps one at a time and see if you can come up with what the correct answer is for the variable. Remember to plug it in to check your answers. If you come up and I don't see that you've checked your work, I'm going to send you back to check it and make sure that you have the correct answer. All right. Good luck. Have some fun, and we'll see you soon.